Welcome back to Grace to Endure. In this video, we're going to take everything that we've learned in the book of Daniel about the 10, and we're going to compare it to Revelation 17, which is the part of Revelation that also talks about the 10 very clearly. Okay, we're going to compile all the information together so that we have a good list of what we should be watching for. I don't know of any specific commands that Christians are told to do when we identify the 10. That's different, of course, than with Babylon. With Babylon, once we identify Babylon, we're supposed to leave. But with the 10, I don't see any direct commands, so I think that that's a good time to apply the other end time commands that we are familiar with. Just be watchful and alert so that you do not get deceived. Okay, so let's pick up at Daniel chapter 2, verses 41 through 44. Look on the left side of the screen to follow along on my notes. And something interesting happens in this passage that often does not happen in prophecy, and that is that the same part of the dream is given actually three interpretations as to what it means. So you're going to hear in this text that it's going to be repeated. Okay, so the fired clay and iron toes has three different meanings. Okay, so look for it. Let's pick up at verse 41. You saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's fired clay and partly of iron. My Bible has a hyphen. Pause. This is going to be the first interpretation, the first meaning of that symbol. It will be a divided kingdom, though some of the strength of iron will be in it. So the iron is what came right before the 10, which I believe, I've already said, is Babylon, that will crush the whole earth. And we know from Daniel chapter 7, which we're about to get to, that these 10 come from that fourth kingdom. So they get some of that kingdom's strength or power generated from it. Perhaps their fame and notoriety. Okay, let's keep reading. Again, he's going to say the same phrase. You saw the iron mixed with clay, and that the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly fired clay. Second meaning, part of the kingdom will be strong and part will be brittle. Okay, so there are differing levels of strength amongst the 10. Not only are they divided and not in complete unity, they have differing levels of strength. Okay, let's go for the third meaning. Verse 43. You saw the iron mixed with clay. The people will mix with one another, and my Bible says in the footnotes, in the seed of men, but will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with fired clay. So some sort of experiment or perhaps a science project or agenda will be tried at this time that will have something to do with the seed of mankind, which the seed of mankind is the male sperm. So some sort of something with the reproduction of humankind. So I don't know if this involves some. I've heard some say that they think that it will be genetics, genetic modification. I'm not sure. Whatever is tried will fail. So that's something that is different, right? We haven't heard that before. So that's something to look for. And our possible ideas might be only partly true, and it might be something we didn't expect. But now that we know to look for it, then we know at least an idea of, hey, they're going to try some sort of something, an experiment of some sort that just, it will fail. It won't work. Okay, so now let's look at verse 44. In the days of those kings, the God of the heavens will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. Okay, and if you can go on to read. So if you look at the last point on the left side under Daniel chapter 2, for point number 3, Jesus will destroy the 10 at his return. So their kingdom that they have, it's going to be destroyed by Jesus at his return. Okay, now let's turn to Daniel chapter 7. Okay, let's pick up reading in Daniel chapter 7, verse 7. It will devour and crush and trample with its feet whatever was left. It was different from all the other beasts before it, and it had 10 horns. We've already discussed the first part of the verse, so I'm just majoring on the 10 today. Let's keep reading in verse 8. While I was considering the 10 horns, suddenly another horn, a little one, came up among them. Okay, so let's pause right there. The little horn is another name for the Antichrist. Each name about the Antichrist tells us more about him. And so in the Bible, horn is talking about power, and we see that it is described as little in the beginning. So the Antichrist comes up, and at first his power is little or small, but it rises and becomes great. So let's keep reading. And 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. Look at the middle of your screen at the notes. Point number 1, the 10 leaders will come from the 4th kingdom. Point number 2, the Antichrist will come from among the 10. Okay, now let's turn and look at verse 20. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and about the other horn that came up. Remember, that's the Antichrist, the horn that came up, the little horn, before which 3 fell. So now if you look at point 3, we have seen the Antichrist will uproot, we've already seen that, and cause to fall or to fell the 3 of those 10 kings. So there's 10 kings. 3 are uprooted or made to fall, okay, once the Antichrist comes up. All right, let's keep reading in verse 24. The 10 horns are 10 kings. That's why I'm calling them kings. Point 1. Who will rise from this kingdom. Also point 1. These 10 rise from the 4th kingdom, which I think is during the Babylon time frame. Okay. Another king, that's the little horn. So now the Antichrist is given another name. He's called a king. Okay. So he's a king that starts with little power, but then exceeds and becomes great. All right. So let's keep reading. I'll just restart that verse. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will rise from this kingdom. Another king, different from the previous ones, will rise after them. So that is that the Antichrist will rise after those 10. Okay? And it said right there that he is going to be different than the 10. All right, so look on the screen, point number 2. The Antichrist will come up from among, and now we can add to that after the 10. That's actually important. Now we just got a little bit of a timeline, didn't we? A sequence of events. The 10 come first, the Antichrist comes after the 10. That's when he arises. Okay? Okay, and let's keep reading. Different from the previous ones, that's the Antichrist, will rise after them and subdue 3 kings. So there that is, point 3 mentioned again, and we are given a third description of what happens to these 3 kings that are part of the 10. So these 3 kings, it's described as they are uprooted, the Antichrist makes them fall, and subdues them. So that gives us a little more insight as to what happens to those 3 kings that are part of the 10. In the very first video in this series, I went into great detail explaining Revelation 17. including these verses that I have listed here. So I'm not going to read them to you, but I do want to use it as a review and a comparison with what we've now learned in Daniel 2 and 7, so we can compile this list of the 10. So point 1 in review, the 10 kings don't have a kingdom at first, but they receive authority for a short time. Point 2, they give their power to the antichrist. Point 3, the 10 kings hate Babylon along with the antichrist, and they work together with the antichrist to make desolate. An important word to think about there is the abomination of desolation, or the abomination that causes desolation. It's described as both in Scripture. To destroy and to burn Babylon. Point number 4, they fight, that's the 10, fight against Jesus and destroys the 10 at his return. You can see all of this here in Revelation 17 in these verses. So take a look at all this, make and compile a list, and now let's be watchful and waiting so that we are not deceived when this all comes up. Just think about it. If we have watched Babylon rise, properly and biblically identified it when it arrives, and we have left Babylon, which will come at great sacrifice, if not prison or death, to our lifestyle, it will come at great sacrifice to our lifestyle. If we have done that, and then we see these 10 rise with these exact distinctives, what a testimony to the authenticity of Scripture that this will be during a very dark and difficult time. And then we will know that the next one to come will be the Antichrist, the lawless one, no matter how good he seems.